Welcome in our dissemination event on the VoW project. For your meal, it's all sustainable, so some people might not call it fair trade, but it is SDG approved, put it that way. It's a nice proof also for our friends in the system that also in the Netherlands we do this with food, not only in Italy. So let's start. So it's about 2 years we're now in this VoW project. We've just finished the second project results, and this is what we're going to discuss. So what is in this project is you have 4 or 5 project results defined. Usually start with a kind of state of the art, what's happening there. And it's very important that you also involve other European countries or many European countries. I want your insight on the matter, because indeed it's very difficult to talk to young people who are involved in volunteering or not, to talk about what are your terms to do something as, for example, supporting fair trade shops or fair trade movement, which might be 2 different kind of things. I just explained one group there that, for example, in Belgium, the student involvement in fair trade movement and fair trade shops is rather high. But that would mean that they organize a fair trade shop for 4 hours in months at a place like this. So that on the 3rd floor, there would be a temporary shop every month run by students. Another option, right? So that's the thing we're going to discuss. There's also an interesting next step that just recently, earlier this year, the UN has declared 2026 as the International Year of Volunteers for Sustainable Development. So 2001, 25 years ago, was the International Year of Volunteering, UN, which, by the way, started in Amsterdam, organizing the kickoff. But now, 25 years later, it will be again the International Year of Volunteers, but with the tag Sustainable Development, run by UNV, which is the UN Organization on Volunteering. So there is, next to all this, others, there's also one specifically for volunteering. So this is where we started. And it's a very civil society issue from the perspective of fair trade. You could not make the claim for all kinds of things together, but one generation of civil society organizations, existing organizations, face the same challenge. It's very difficult to attract young people, young volunteers. Of course, if volunteering stays the same and new organizations come up, existing organizations by definition have a problem, because they're recruiting in the same pie and are new things. But in this case, it was also a bit like, how can we connect a new generation of volunteers to these SDGs? And as we said, these organizations also find it sometimes very difficult to connect themselves to the SDGs, although for fair trade should not be a big problem, right? Several on the first row that you can attach. Then the issue of the volunteers in fair trade. So our State of the Union, Current Affairs, says something that is really a white female, over the 50, maybe even a little bit older, highly educated, and somewhere on the left political spectrum in these organizations, which is of course not so weird if you talk about fair trade, although the trade solution might be not combined with that one. And what do we see? Why is this a problem? Well, in the case of the fair trade, it's really rigidity in organizing. Paltry of the idea, it's 4 hours a week in the shop, because we have to run the shop. That's the most important thing. And then the rest might come. So we found out there is no, let's say, specific additional volunteering around Christmas. Which from both sides you can expect more people needed in the shop around Christmas. And you might expect also more people to willing volunteer around Christmas, right? It's a very easy sell to that. It's not. High barriers to entry. You must be able to work with the cash, the automatic system, languages, etc. So a very complex This is what happens in the fair trade. But if you go to the UK literature about charity shops, so in the UK, I've been on holiday there, every shopping street has a lot of charity shops where you can just buy all kind of second-hand stuff as a kind of donations. And that is, according to literature, a lot of young people like you are volunteering there for the CV, so the curriculum, for study points as part of this kind of courses for all kinds of reasons. And one explanation is it's also made very available. You go to Outlook agendas and click yourself 2 or 3 hours. There's also, by the way, just an interesting reason why there are so many charity shops. The first one is really a traditional fundraising by selling something. But also that in some UK cities, if your shop is not used, you pay more taxes than when your shop is used. So if you own shops, you want them to be used. And with charities, you can, even without charging their rent, your taxes, your property taxes go down. And because you don't charge them rent, you're also allowed to kick them out if you have a real possibility of using the shop. So it also explains why there are so many of these shops. But here the story is. So you just kick in. These are the partners?
Yeah, so these are the partners coming from various countries, like we already said. You have Altromercato in Italy, which is a bit different from the other two because they are more, their shops are independent and they are a cooperative. Where in the other case, the other two are much more an umbrella organization, which means that Altromercato has less power over the organizations and the shops than the other two. And then we also, of course, include us. And then we have another Italian partner who is focused on the training of volunteers. And just to be aware here that the partner organizations from the fair trade movement, they have hundreds and hundreds of shops combined altogether. So that also means if you will be able to change something on a policy level, that it reaches a lot of different places. So for this project, we have 3 core project results. The first, as Lucas already said, it's a bit similar to what he just said about the state of the art, but we took a look at how are these organizations either the same or are they different from one another? Well, one of these differences I just mentioned, but in a lot of cases, in terms of the products that they sell, the way they interact with their volunteers, the type of people that volunteer there, and many other facets, they are very similar to one another. And we also tried to figure out where are they when it comes to things like validation. So there's a hot topic in volunteering, and especially in these type of Erasmus projects, about how can we validate that people have certain skills, right? So that's about you're able to work a cash register. You're going to validate that. You're able to do a social media campaign. Is that something that you would want to validate? How far are they in that? Well, none of them are validating any skills right now, and that's why in the second results, which is about training resources and validation guidelines, we have thought up a way of how could they implement validation for their volunteers, and in which circumstances would that even make sense?
The validation question is a big part of what I call the informal learning perspective. We, for example, for refugees or migrants or people with a long distance to the labor market, it's very important that what you learn in volunteering or in just doing something also translates in recognized job market skills, right?
And so what they say is that because of their current volunteer pool and the fact that they are usually already quite established and a little bit older, that validation is not really necessary. You know, why would they want a certificate for one thing or the other? If they're already pension age, why would they want that? Especially if they're already highly educated, why would you want a certificate for either language or for working a cash register or things like that when you're already retired and have a master's degree? You're not really going to care. But that means that these organizations may have left that out for a bit too long and have now the opportunity to take in validation as a means of attracting more volunteers. So there are certain groups for which this makes a lot more sense. If you are a newcomer, for example, and you're able to combine the work that you do with some kind of language certification, I can imagine that being very useful. But also, and that's a question we're going to pose to you later, is it also something that students want? if you think about that. And then we have a third result, and I'll go a little bit deeper into the second result in a bit, because that's really what we're here for. And the third result is more an online repository of the material that we've made and any and all material that we can find out there that is useful for fair trade and also SDG-oriented volunteering. That's what we're working on right now. Yeah, we can pass this around now. So the second result. We have created a set of e-learnings, and that's where we really try to get in certain topics that are, on the cutting edge of volunteer management, and we've succeeded in part. And we've created 3 units. So the first unit is about recruiting, welcoming, and recognizing volunteers. The second one is about managing volunteers, about the fair trade shop, and about internal and external communication. And then the third one is really focused on sustainability. It's about the fair trade principles, it's about sustainability, and it's about the Sustainable Development Goals. And one thing that's very nice that we've developed is what we call the Fair Trade Fresque. I don't know if any of you have ever heard about the Climate Fresque, but it's basically this card game that you can do to, in a very short amount of time, like an hour, hour and a half, truly understand the scientific complexities of climate change. So you can download that on our website, and you can also then download the Fair Trade Fresque. And as I mentioned, we then also created a separate report for how to validate volunteer competencies, and in which cases does that make sense. And then finally, there's a big report tying it all together. Download them now on the VoW website. So, charity retail. So the overarching theme here, and that's not what's so much in the proposal per se, but really that's something that we have made it about, is charity retail in general. And as Lucas already mentioned, the situation per country can differ quite heavily. So in the UK, for example, there's really no issue of finding people to work in thrift shops, for example, young people. It's even used as a good means of studying the language. People come in there and they want to study English, and so working in a shop environment makes it very approachable for them. But Fair Trade Shop is just one example. There are a lot of different types of charity retail shops out there. So one that we've found is, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, is Madrehelpen. Let's hope no one from Denmark watches this. And their twist is that, so it's a thrift shop. They have secondhand stuff, but at the same time they offer this sort of social work perspective for single or at-risk mothers. Right? So in their case, it's very direct. It's very strongly connected to the store, and the store is also a place where they can find these people that they might want to help with this other side of their profit. Then we have the British Red Cross, or Red Cross shops in general, which we also have a few in the Netherlands, which are also usually about giving products a second life and second-hand products in general. You have your typical kringloop thrift shop, more furniture and clothing a bit on the side. You have Terre des Hommes. Some of you may have seen this before. Those stores are also in the Netherlands, and they're quite visible in some places. They have a bit of a different approach. Of course, Terre des Hommes is about stopping child exploitation, so they are more more politicized in their shop, I would say. They sell also things like books and things on political themes. And then finally we have, and this is just a few examples, I would love to know if you have more, is Doorkas. And Doorkas is a type of organization, I think it's Christian-based, right? Which is the only one here that I've put here that has a really strong religious affiliation. And what they do is they use their proceeds to fund, projects all around the world for people that are impoverished. Right? So the store is still similar to a kringloop, a lot of secondhand stuff. But then the proceeds go to, for example, a water project somewhere in Africa. And that's how they use their proceeds, right? So in fair trade, the surplus goes to providing, it's new products, obviously, and it's about trade, it's about craft, it's about providing the people that produce this with a better living. And with Doorkas, it's about using the proceeds for a good cause. Anything you want to add, Lucas?
Oh, anyone familiar with some of these?
Yeah, so who knew all of these? Well, Maderhelp, of course not, because that's a typical, just a Danish one. Of course, you knew, maybe not Kringloop Den Haag, but you know Kringloop stores. Terre des Hommes shop, anyone? Just a few, not very well known. So that means more people have heard of the fair trade shop than the Terre des Hommes shop. All right.
Anyone involved in Doorkas? Typically, some places in the Netherlands very, very well organized. The fair trade shop, yes. This is the one that sells whatever, right?
Yeah.
So including chocolate and.
So this is not one that we visited. We visited multiple anytime that we are in another country for an event or a project meeting. We visit a fair trade shop. This is one that is, I would say, I think this picture is not from like last year. Most of them are a bit more, let's say, they are simpler in the products that they put out everywhere. It's a bit quieter in terms of their visual design, let's say. And so what they sell a lot of different things. So they sell food and beverages, crafts, art, beauty and well-being, babies and children's products, gourds, jewelry, stationery, jewelry again, clothing, bags, cleaning products, seasonal products, and
the no waistline, all right, which are northern products.
and so there are a lot of categories, but this gives you a little bit of an idea of what these stores sell. So if you're thinking of, oh, I'm going to go there and I have this very wide selection of let's say daily groceries, that's not the case. The food and beverages really are more the incidental. It's more the gift shop type thing. I think most people, when they go to a fair trade shop, they think I can get a really nice gift here. That's something that we can say after visiting quite a few of them. So the fair trade shop, and this is just bring you up to speed a little bit also because we're going to ask you about the volunteering side of this. This is what a typical fair trade shop looks like, or we said the dream shop, right? If you have every position sort of filled, which means that you have on one end an HR manager, a product manager who decides what is being sold and where it's put, someone in charge of the finances. Of course, you usually would have a coordinator, but in some cases it's a team of people that are coordinating because some of the fair trade shops, especially those in Belgium, they don't like hierarchy. Where in other shops it's much more of a traditional hierarchy that you will see in any other retail situation. And then there's more a movement part. It's about internal and external communication, it's about events, it's about campaigning, and it's about, in some cases, raising educational awareness. It's about going to schools, for example, and teaching them about fair trade, about sustainability. So this is your typical fair trade shop, and then on top there you also have governance roles. So this is when you are in a foundation, there's usually a board, etc., and then you have them. And the Belgian part has a sort of national assembly type situation where you can also volunteer for more governance-oriented roles on a, let's say, umbrella level. But those are still volunteer positions.
Before you move on, one important discussion with them was about this line. Because the question is, should everybody who sells the product also be able to explain why it is so good to buy fair trade? Should everybody be able to explain that the product comes from high in the mountains in Chile or somewhere a small village and how much they pay and things like that? So some are, again, hardliners. Everybody working there should be able to explain. It also explains why you should be able to speak French. But also that you need a kind of training to understand what you're selling. But not what you're selling like this is the beautiful jewelry, but how much of the price goes to, etc.
What's the story behind it?
And how can we prove, how do we, etc. That's a bit of a high bar, right? But also explain why the 4 hours a week in the shop is needed. It's also a bit like, are they now having QR codes? No, they don't. So they also don't think about this way, okay, you can have a lot of information about the products.
Oh, no.
Available for clients or for the people working there. So also from that perspective.
So how they say it themselves is that you have a lot of volunteers that are there that enjoy the shop work. They like stocking the shelves, they like talking to customers, they like selling the products. But about the whole backstory of every product, less so. But there are other volunteers that really feel like an ambassador of the fair trade movement. They love talking about the products and the story behind them. They love going to producers, for example, and they have sometimes very intricate stories about these, about how that producer came to be and what the product is like and all those types of things. So there's a big discrepancy there.
This might be the kind of volunteer you want to walk away from when you're in the shop, but that's something else, right?
So, question to you. I think I know the answer already. Just show of hands, has anyone ever volunteered in the shop before?
to rephrase. What did you do? Yes. Yeah, you're the only one.
So we actually had a temporary trade shop on campus when I was studying in Utrecht before, and it was organized by Green Office of Utrecht University. So a group of students, we volunteer to take the shift on the site. So people will come and they can take whatever they like, and they can also bring their stuff and put it there.
So what did you think of that experience? What was it like?
It's very time consuming.
Sure.
Yes.
to be there all the time.
There always has to be someone at the location. It has to stay open at all times, or at least in the situation of the fair trade shops, they have to be open during regular hours. So there's just a lot of time to fill. And you don't want people to be alone. So you also need multiple people at once. Otherwise, it's just maybe even sometimes a bit dangerous. How are you going to keep someone from stealing if you're talking to someone and there's no one else sort of there? But you're the only one. There's no one else that has ever volunteered in a shop before. What shop?
Star?
Oh, Star. Maybe on the university. There's an RSM shop. Is that a paid position?
I don't think so. Oh, I would call the Star shop. I'm wrong.
Oh, okay.
That is the Star Shop.
Oh, it is the Star shop.
I think it is.
So when I studied here, I did a bookstore, which was the previous Star shop, because we had so many physical books, and we organized a nice debate, a nice prize cut with Dollar, who was that time at campus. And a lot of work, but a lot of interesting things, all right? But yeah, so these shops also have gone, of course, many places.
So you just said, let's rephrase the question.
Yeah.
To what? What did you want to rephrase it to?
Well,
No, I was wondering if there's still a second really good
what
question
would be,
here.
let's assume your parents have a shop, and you're working there without really, I mean, in a family business, we call it volunteering.
Makes one think. But would you call it volunteering if you work for your parents without pay? Who thinks that's volunteering? No one does. That's interesting. Huh? Because in some cases you would you would define volunteering as a pay rate.
And outside the household, so this is a question, right? Oh, good.
Right. Okay. So what we want you to do now. So obviously you've never done it. Maybe I should ask the second question as well. After seeing this and also hearing a bit more about the various kinds of shops and positions, who would consider it to volunteer in a shop? Okay, it's not too bad. It's about half. Who would seriously consider it? So, I mean, no.
Let's find arguments. Why?
So now that we know that, let's discuss amongst ourselves, discuss with your neighbors. Which type of shop would you most likely want to volunteer in if you would do so? Would you volunteer in a fair trade shop? And if yes, why? And if not, under which circumstances would you volunteer? So I'll keep this slide up. So just take about 10 minutes, maybe get some extra food if you want to. And we'll be back in 10 minutes. So please discuss this amongst yourselves. So we've all had a chat. So who can tell me something about what type of shop they would most likely want to volunteer for and why? What would be a reason why you would choose one shop over the other? Go ahead.
I was thinking I would rather volunteer at an organization like the food bank, because food is like a necessity in life, while in gift shops I would be a bit more like, well, there's a good cause behind it, but the action itself doesn't feel as urgent.
The action is too removed from the cause, basically. But would you have the same situation when you would have a shop like Doorkast, for example, where you are selling second-hand stuff for a good cause? Would that make a difference still?
I feel like it's still a difference, but maybe a smaller difference.
Right.
As in fair trade.
Okay. So, Lucas, maybe you should do this part so I can actually write some of this down.
Okay.
And we have some input.
So we got one answer, like, okay, maybe a food bank, which you indeed can also see as a kind of store, is more convenient because you're directly helping clients. Well, it's a bit indirect. Go ahead.
Well, I think it does make a difference for me. For example, the therein shop is more of an impact thing for me than the fair trade, because you can see it's related to a cause. So then I would say it does make a big difference, and I would rather choose one with the costs connected to it.
Yep. So fair trade is too difficult to grasp.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the impact is directly of my work there.
Any other examples, ID, what will make it practically possible for you? So if one argument is like, okay, it's a different kind of cost, right? Thrift shops were also interesting because you feel actually what you're saving. I mean, in the second-hand clothes, you really feel part of the movement of prolonging the life of clothes. Would that be an argument?
I think it would, but for me it would more be like of the vibe. For example, if it's a very modern thrift shop, I would rather go there than if it's a, I don't know, less modern, I would say, and a bit more smelly. But I think it's the same with fair trade. Like if it's more of a concept store, I would definitely want to work there because it's like a kind of image thing. But if it's more of a nature kind of vibe, I would probably pass on it.
Any ideas? To continue in your second. No, I'm not thinking of it. You made a remark about it, which we would translate. It's also about the other volunteers, right?
Yeah.
The other volunteers are all 70 plus. It might not the most convincing environment to work and feel like it fits your. How can you solve this kind of problem, right? Basically, you have these volunteers. Firing them is a little bit. Basically, you're too old. You're not allowed to come anymore. We do it paid staff, of course. But we don't do there. Under what kind of circumstances would you be, let's say, convinced to work for these kind of things? Of course.
I think I do agree that other volunteers have an effect, but I think for me, I would also like it if there are older people working there and if they have knowledge about the products that they're selling and they have interesting stories. I think that will be still fun. So I think selecting volunteers, you should be and maybe look at someone's presence and if they're a bit chatty and if you're in the store the whole day, it's nice to have someone who is social, I guess.
So we can think about other, I mean, we're also now focusing on the store, right? But you might think that if you think about a chain of store or an individual store, there are much more, many other jobs you can imagine. What kind of jobs around this shop environment? So next to working in the shop, your 4-hour shift or whatever, what kind of things could you imagine that would be interesting?
Maybe the supply side, like ordering, stocking, finances.
So I don't know if you've thought about the various types of shops, but maybe we could go past these and see which is the most popular one. So who would consider working at the Madre Helpe most? Show of hands. So it's the store that also has this social work side to it, helping at-risk mothers. Okay, just a few. 4, 5, okay, so 20%. What about the Red Cross shop? Okay, very interesting. So can I ask one of you why? Would anyone tell me why this one opposed to the others, the Red Cross one? It's just a feeling.
Well, I don't know, but I like the other ones. Well, I've been in a Red Cross shop, so it's a bit easier for me to know what it is. But I like the concept. Like I like the things you can buy and the fact that your immediate purchase actually has an immediate effect. And that's why I think I would also like to volunteer there because you know that's. So
what immediate effect is that in this case?
Well, when you buy, it goes directly to Red Cross, right? And then they help whatever.
It's fundraising, it's proceeds. Yeah, it's kind of similar as Dorcas has, but just more a different different approach. What about just a regular thrift store, second-hand store? Yeah. Okay. Why?
Personally, I like to restore stuff to give it new life. And secondly, it also gives opportunity for people that don't have a high income to still buy things that are of decent quality. So yeah, it's a personal reason that I just like to restore things, and that for people it gives a chance to buy nice stuff also.
Okay, I think that's a very good one. I mean, you bring something in that's broken to a thrift store and they give it a second life, right? That's really nice. I know that you have one in Den Haag where you bring in furniture and they actually restore the furniture and they paint it and all that kind of stuff and they sell it for significantly more than you would at a thrift store, but then you don't have to do that yourself, which I think is very nice. But that's only like, you have 10 of them and it's like a subset of one that does this, so not very common. What about the Terre des Hommes store? Anyone who has that as a preference?
We have one here.
What about one here, obviously? No one else. Okay.
Is that more about clothes?
This was more strictly about books.
This one is really about books.
Yeah, I didn't even saw it.
Well, I mean, it's quite small. I understand it. It's about giving books a second chance in this case, and the proceeds go to stopping child exploitation. So knowing that, anyone has preference? Yeah, the books. It's about the books. Makes sense. And then finally, Dorcas, with their doing projects in the global south. There. Could you elaborate a little bit, if you want to?
I think because it has direct impact and you know for what it is, so you can, you know what you're contributing to. So I would prefer that.
Yeah, so it's about the larger projects that they're doing that you can sort of directly grasp, as opposed to, oh, it's just going somewhere and it's like good in the value chain, but then
Where does it really go?
where does it really go? Yeah. Okay. Very interesting reasons that I can totally get behind.
So what we did not hear, and now we're running the risk of saying something which is not in the correct words, but we were thought about, okay, how many young people would like to volunteer as an unboxing volunteer, right? So you make these movies of, you get something, you buy something, and then you tell others they should also buy too. If you go to the Jagerjob website, they have now this intern who makes every day something on all these things and tells about how exciting it is to get these birthday boxes and to make them and things like that. So we thought that would be a very kind of interesting thing to offer for young people. And we saw, of course, to block any others that they only allow people doing this when they work at a shop. And we thought about decoupling that, right? Would that make if we move away from the shop, to think about all the things you can do to sell the products, to support the products, to crowdfund or crowd sell, or how you want to call it. It would change the ballgame, right?
So if you have all these different things that you can do in these associations, foundations, then you have the typical volunteer who is simply volunteering in the store. Now, who would be more likely to work for one of these organizations if it was not in the store but something else? So you decouple it from shop work altogether, and you're able to do either HR or finance or even communications, or go to schools and tell the story. Who would be more likely to want to be coupled with the organization then? So no shop work, something else. Okay, that's almost everyone. So the shop work is not that popular. All right.
Is it because it's easier or because it's a different kind of work?
You can combine it so that you're not just standing in the shop, but maybe one day you're in the shop, one day you're going to school, so that is kind of a diverse experience, I think.
I agree, but what if you have to also work in the store?
Yeah, so that's what I mean. So if you could, so if that's part of it, my personal idea would be that's fine. But because you have all these other things you're doing, you're actually also getting a lot more experience, the things that are useful for the rest of your life.
Maybe if it's quiet, you can do it while you're, ram out a social media campaign while it's quiet in the store, who knows?
I was also thinking it might be closer to your own discipline.
Yeah, sure.
When you're studying HR, for instance, you can do HR work and you actually learn from it. So there's also benefit for you.
Yeah, no, that's very true. So in this case, it is the right group to ask, because there's like all these different business facets in here.
You can imagine if you do marketing, that this is a really nice place just to exercise. Okay. what it means to market these kind of things. Downside of the, let's say, X, still prone to say Twitter, X volunteer, is that it also might be very lonely. You're sitting somewhere back home, and you don't meet others. So it's a bit, which of course also opens it up for people who are disabled, etc. But go ahead.
So there's this other part of fair trade and of these other types of organizations as well, is that they have a really specific movement part behind it. So together with other volunteers, you set up campaigns, you set up events around social issues. So the activities, so this can be in fair trade, in the fair trade case, it's about fair labor conditions, sustainability. I know that in Italy they host fast fashion or anti-fast fashion events. And then your activities are not working in the store, but it's about campaigning, mobilization, organizing protests maybe, or political events, doing social media, going to schools and educating people about the social side of things. We of course want to ask this question as well. First of all, who has done something like this before? So any of these activities like campaigning, mobilizing, protests type stuff, social media, political type things, talking at schools maybe? Talking at schools? We're like a few.
About what?
One there.
Well, I had this one sexual education thing in high schools. So the goal was that if teachers teach like the students, they were like, yeah, whatever this old person is talking to.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's like students, it's more accessible and so on.
Yeah, it's also about sexual education, but more focused on menstrual education. So we want to talk to more parents and students, regardless of their gender, to teach them, how does menstruation work.
So how are you prepared for this kind of, doing this kind of things? Was there a kind of training or?
Yeah, so in the organization, they train the volunteers, and then we also have those equipment tools that you can demonstrate.
I used to, because I'm from Taiwan, and then there was a referendum on gay marriage. So we just mobilize and collect the signatures and talk to like people on the street about this issue, and hope they can support this campaign.
How often did you do this?
Because it's like in a period, so it's for like several months, I think.
It's a very good one because that is, of course, a typical thing. If you think about, okay, what is campaigning? Collecting signatures is often part of it, right?
Do we have some fingers there?
I don't think so. Oh.
Yeah.
So that was question number one. We are not going to split up again because we don't have that much time anymore. But I would like to know, knowing now that this part of these types of organizations exist, and especially for fair trade, who would be more inclined to volunteer on that side instead of the store? By show of hands. Would you rather work in a store or be involved in campaigning, doing things on social media, going to schools and educating?
So interesting. Really? The whole literature would tell that you as a group are much more into this flexible campaigning where you can just do something on your Facebook or your TikTok or your Instagram or whatever.
You're all young, so you love that.
That's what you can tell. It's not what we observe. Okay, in countries where volunteering is high, we do not observe that, right? So it's what Matthew Hustings describes as you are going to write your biography and you're this liberated citizen. You're not blocked anymore by church and religion and things like that. You can voice your opinion, and that's what you continuously do, voice your opinion. Yeah, forget it. Of course you voice your opinion, but becoming a member of a bigger movement is something else, right? So that's a question. Of course, they claim that in order to be able to allowed to speak for them, to represent them in a movement kind of thing, or to go to a school and do a lecture, you have to you have to be active in the stores. Mm-hmm. Which on the one hand is a good thing because it prepares you, it gives you also kind of background. But you really do not need it. I mean, one training and some material might be enough, right? So this is the kind of dilemma many of these combinations of servers and campaigning phase that, if we observe, we like a lot, on all kinds of social media, go ahead.
I think it's also important that the most important thing is that you connect with the cause you're sort of campaigning for. So I will personally, I'm not as involved in a fair trade campaign as in some other campaigns, so I wouldn't choose to do it. But if you are a fair trade, if you believe in the fair trade cause and you want to campaign for it, but you also have to do the shop hours, you might be able to do both because you're not motivated.
Yeah. But then maybe let me just clarify the question once more to make sure that we have it right. So I'm not referring per se to doing it for fair trade, the campaigning side, the political side. So would you be more likely to volunteer in any store or to do volunteering of any kind in a movement?
How do we call the sustainability hub downstairs?
Yeah,
What's that? Campaigning movement?
A quick show of hands. Same question, a bit rephrased. Yeah.
But what is hands up?
Hands up means a pro movement. More likely in the movement. Just any movement versus any shop.
Does it mean that the movement is more sporadic, so that you can just join?
Let's say in this case it's organized. It's well organized, and you're part of that organization.
But one of the problems is that many people think that movement is so easy, you can walk in, walk out. Which makes, of course, from a management perspective also very uncontrollable. You know who are working in your shops, right? You have no idea who's part of your movement. And for how long. And what they will say as a school, right? You try to train them. Thanks.
I must say, I didn't expect it. I expected more people in the movement.
Yeah, I think most of them are movement, and I would say shop because I feel like it's less effort. Like you just show up at a certain time, be there, and then leave. And I feel with the campaigning, you always bring it home. So you always think about it or think about like a new campaign or a new social media post, whereas the store you just go and whenever you leave, it's just done.
It's beautiful research done by Margaret Harris, who writes about Greenpeace volunteers and calls it lifestyle volunteering. Lifestyle. There's simply no way you cannot be that. It's 24/7, right? Because whatever you do, people also just ask you why you're doing this. So, okay, thanks. Does it feel more unsafe to movement than working in the shop?
Unsafe?
Yeah, unsafe.
No, not really. I don't see any safety reasons.
The one is very outward political, and the other is more, okay, I'm just in the store, no one can really have anything against that.
Maybe more of like a image thing, yes. But safety, I don't know.
Oh, I'm going to brainwave, like, okay, so Extension Rebellion is going to open stores where you cannot buy things made by fossil, all right? Energy.
Well, ultimately sustainable products.
That's interesting. Well, all right. Good.
So then we have a question, but do we still have time?
This is one of the questions that mind boggles us, right? There's huge European projects on what they call early gotten competencies, eerder verworven competenties. So there's a European passport that you as a volunteer in Europe, specifically aimed at young people like you, can describe the competencies you've earned by volunteering. Interestingly enough, students all over Europe and universities do a lot of volunteering with all kinds of associations, but they don't use the European value, the European passport. It seems really connected to the idea, this is for non-formal education, right? So you do your student association, you do your whatever, you write it down in your resume or your LinkedIn, but you do not use the tools to validate the competencies. You claim it brings a lot of competencies, but the tools which are there are not used. It sounds like an exposition, it's not. But it's really a constant, because people that use these tools are the people who are not in formal education. Right? So our question here is a little bit like, is it important that indeed you develop these competencies? Yes or no? If you observe your behavior, it seems to be very important. If you ask you why you're doing this, you can tell the stories about leadership, presenting, etc. But then if you ask, did you ever validate them? It's an interesting question, right? And would that work?
So when you volunteer, how important is it for you to also gain very specific competencies with that? Who has really done a specific type of volunteering just for the skill development?
It's a half-half.
Okay, so it was important, at least. And then, so that's...
How deliberate was your skill development?
So I guess I did STAR committees, so it was a part social and also a part where you thought, oh, it looks nice on my CV, I will be able to learn how to work together, how to organize events, stuff like that. Yeah.
More emergent than deliberate, is it?
Yeah.
So and you?
Oh, I wanted to practice Dutch, so I signed up for a volunteer to take care of the elderly.
So that's very deliberate, right? Then you have the idea there's a skill that they can learn or competency or whatever or practice. And this is the reason why I do this volunteering. It's very explicit. I mean, the STAR environment is much more like, okay, we all know, we write it down. And if you ask what you think you've learned, you make a very long list. But there's no way of proving that you actually learned it, right? Other examples?
Used to do like a volunteer, but they phrase it as an internship in an organization. So I've been there for 2 years and taking care of their marketing campaigns. So I think for me, I wasn't paid at all, but I can develop because I was studying in marketing also. So I feel like that is very relevant, and I can also put it in my CV, and I feel like I want to also contribute to that organization. So for me, it's like, yeah, I think it fits well.
Yeah. So we have questions about this in this pre-occupational volunteering, right? You volunteer in something that you think the right skills for what you want to do later on. STAR and management is a nice connection. The law shops, rechtswinkel, sorry for the Dutch, and law students, or the tax shop, belastingwinkel, where you help poor people to fill in the tax forms. That kind of things we do, we see a lot of connection between them.
True.
And this, what?
It's time to submit your tax form.
It is. Yeah, it is. So, but so there are a lot of people doing that kind of things when they study, all right, which is really connected to what they're supposedly going to do later. But again, no validation. But it's the idea that experience brings in this knowledge, right?
So the thing that they say about students is that a very important motivation to do things is to develop certain competencies and then to put the experience on your CV, right? I think it's a bit different in other countries. I think in the Netherlands people care a little less and a little bit more. In these Erasmus Plus projects, you see that certain countries, they want a certificate for everything. And in other countries, like in the Netherlands, we don't really bother with them. But it is a serious question. Is it important to you at all to receive certificates when you volunteer for the skills that you have developed? For anyone? Yeah, go ahead.
If in the end people at job interviews want them or requesting them.
Do you think they would ask for a certificate for something you did during volunteering?
No, I don't think so now. So then it doesn't really matter. You can just showcase that you.
So I had a thesis where someone went to about 10 of these classical Dutch student associations, including STAR, and asked the previous committee and board members what they thought they learned. So the companies made a very long list. That was most part of the master research, master thesis. And then he went to 5 HRM officers and asked them, what do you think they've learned? Something completely different. Very interesting. So not the basic kind of skills, but really like this. Being able to work, being able to do 2 things together, study and having fun in your association, etc., etc. Very interesting. The miscommunication between the 2 lists. Okay. We do know some situations where really people use this kind of thing as part of your continuous education, so later on. We know mediators who do mediation between citizens without pay and paid. as a kind of maintaining the skills or growing them. And we get to the end of our time, is this?
Shelf it maybe.
Yeah, we're going to thank you very much for participating in this dissemination event.